Hi, I'm John Twist of University Motors, and today I want to talk about MGB oil pressure. It's a common question that I get during my technical time. My oil pressure is low. What can I do about it? Before I go into what you can do about it, let me show you the way that it works. This is my schematic diagram here, and here's the sump of the engine underneath here, and our oil pump draws the oil up off the sump and blows it first into the oil pressure relief valve. Now I got all these little chambers here and so forth. Let me show you how these work. The oil comes up here against the oil pressure relief valve, and the faster the engine goes, the more pressure there is coming up against here. Well, this valve opens up and relieves some of the pressure, and the oil drops back into the sump to a line here. We'll show you on the block itself. And then the remaining oil goes up out the back of the block and into the oil filter. But this valve is critical to keep the oil from getting too high, the pressure from getting too high. Sometimes if the valve is jammed or the machine shop has accidentally blocked this line up here, we'll see the oil pressure go up to about 100 pounds before it blows the filter apart. Now the oil that gets past the oil pressure relief valve comes in back here behind the chain, and where there's no vent, it would fill with oil back here, lock this valve up, and the valve couldn't push back, and the oil pressure would skyrocket again. So there's a little bleed here at the back of the oil pressure relief valve that allows the oil to get past the valve and drop back in. So let's go back in the back of the shop, and I'll show you an MGB block and show you how the oil flows in the block. Here we are in our engine area, so let me show you the block here. Now, of course, this is upside down, so like yesterday, you either have to turn your monitor upside down or imagine this. The oil comes out of the oil pump up into this hole here. That hole there is that boss that runs along the side here, and it's been drilled on the end. So the oil is coming out of here. Now from here, it comes across through here, up to here, and then you can see there's a boss on the side of the block here, and the oil comes out of the back of the block up here, where then it goes into the oil filter. But what about that oil pressure relief valve? Well, right at the head of the oil pressure relief valve, which is this guy here, and he fits into this big hole here on the side, up against here, we have a cross drilling here. I painted the brass plugs yellow so you can see them. Right at the head of here, drilled into here, we've got our oil pressure relief valve. And when that gets pushed back, when the valve gets pushed back, oil dumps out of here and back into the sump. Now that cross drilling that I showed you before is done here and here, so that the oil cannot get behind the valve and cause a hydraulic lock and keep the valve from opening. So there's a hole, obviously, drilled through here that allows the oil that gets behind the valve to vent back in. So when your machine shop is doing the work, usually they'll take a prick punch and put a little prick beside each one of these brass plugs that they take out. If they put a plug back in here, which is not unheard of, then as soon as you start the car, spin it over, your oil pressure goes up to 100, 200, 300 pounds, blows the filter apart, and so forth. So that is the oil production system. The oil is made this way. Let me show you how it's used. So here's our MGB block, an 18V block, and the only difference between an MGA engine and MGB engine are the two extra main bearings. So our oil is coming out of the back of the block here, comes up out of here, and comes through the oil filter assembly, which is located here, and then is run into this oil gallery that runs either side here, and there's two holes on either side here, and the oil is able to get into the block and go either way. Back out of the block, you've got your oil fitting here on the end, and that is where the line goes up to the oil pressure gauge. Now let's look underneath this guy, and we'll see that there are, from that main oil gallery, we've got our oil coming to the main bearings all along here, and then finally up here. So our oil is shooting up into the 5 main bearings, from the first, second, and third main bearings, then it's fed to the rods. On the first, second, and third bearings, it's then in turn sent up to the camshaft. Here, here, and hard to see with a camera, but through here. And that comes up to the cam bearings. Now, the rear cam bearing, here, if Danny can get down and get the gasket out of here, we've got this hole here. Remember, we got oil coming into here, and out of that hole goes up to here at the top of the block, and that's where our oil goes up to the rockers in spurts every time the cam spins around. In our center bearing here, which is going to be hard to see, but our center bearing right down here, can you see that? Is that good enough? Mm-hmm. All right, so that bearing, that feeds our low pressure oil gallery, which runs along this side of the block here, and that in turn oils the head of the distributor drive gear here. That's the oil pump drive gear, and the distributor drive gear, which crosses it, if I can get my there through here. So that low pressure oiling system on the left hand side of the block only oils the top of the oil gear and the distributor drive gear. And up at the front we have our main gallery here, which feeds our oil up into the main bearing. And then we have this guy who sends the oil into the front cam bearing, and you can see that hole here. So our front cam bearing is fed here. Then there's also a cross drilling, if you can imagine, which comes up on the side here. There's a little brass plug, hard to see him, but he's right here. That's a brass plug right there. And that cross drilling connects these two holes here and here, and that's the oil that weeps out of the front of the cam bearing and gets trapped behind the plate, and that runs over and provides the hydraulic pressure here for the timing chain tensioner. So there we've got it, although it's pretty fast. So the question always is, what can I do about low oil pressure? Okay, well, low oil pressure is either because the oil's too thin, so you've got to strengthen up the oil, make sure you're running 2050 or 1540 if you're worried about this ZDDP thing. Secondly, you've got to make sure the oil pump, which fits, of course all this is upside down, I know, but the oil pump fits on here and makes the oil pressure, so the pump has to be in good shape. You don't have to buy a new pump, you do have to buy new oil pump guts. And all the oil is being used here in the bearings. Now some people say, oh, my oil pressure is bad because my cam bearings are bad. That's not the truth. My oil pressure is bad because my rockers are weeping too much oil. No way. No way. The oil that's getting used is going through the bearings, and just generally speaking, it's going through the rod bearings, and that's where the greatest loss is. You can take the sump off the bottom of the engine and change the rod bearings in place, and you can change the 3 center main bearings in place. You cannot change the front and rear bearings because the caps are attached to the front and back engine bearing plates. But you can change these 3 bearings, and that's what we'll do here at the shop. When you've got 90,000 miles on the car and you want to get another 50, 60,000 miles on it. If you don't do anything, you can only get up to about 125,000 usually before you start to pick up a rod knocker, such severe wear that you can't retrieve the engine. You have to take the crank out and have a whole lot of work done. But if you do change the oil pump guts, change the 4 rod bearings, the 3 center mains, put in a new oil pressure relief valve and spring back here, where'd it go? Here on the side. Then you can restore your oil pressure, and all MGAs, all MGBs should blow off at around 75 pounds or so. They can idle, most of them idle around 40, 50 pounds. If it idles at 10, that's okay, as long as when you hit the throttle, it pops right up to 75 pounds or so. Anyway, that's the oil distribution system. If we had this thing on a turntable, we could have shown how it all worked by shooting from underneath, but we didn't. We had to look at it from upside down. So if you did turn your monitor upside down to watch all this, you'll have to write it again. Anyway, thanks very much. We're desperate for your business, so send us along an alternator, generator, a gearbox, your whole car, and we'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow.